very loud.
Coffee, yeah.
So welcome you all on the 5th day, and today is the last day. I'll request Professor Sunil to start the introduction of the speaker.
Good afternoon to all of you. Today, it's an honor and privilege to welcome our eminent speaker, Dr. Stephen Knott. He's completed his Bachelor of Dental Science, University of Western Australia in 1969. The member of Australian Defence Forces with the rank of a captain since 1969 to 71. Graduate Forensic Odontology, University of Melbourne in 1992. Registered with Australian Dental Board as a specialist of Forensic Odontologist. Is a visiting professor for Knott Western University, Chicago, 1976 to 1977. The private dental practice and course founder and current Bachelor in Postgraduate of Forensic Odontology at University of Western Australia. Is an Australian Federal Police representative in Forensic Odontology for past major international disasters such as in Bali 2002, Asian Tsunami 2005, Christmas Island refugee, the boat disaster in 2011, the participant to the Black Saturday Victoria bushfires in 2009, and is a past president of Australian Society of Forensic Odontology and the Australian New Zealand Forensic Sciences Society, Western Australia. So here I present Dr. Stephen Knott. He is presenting on the changing role of the forensic odontology. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Professor Sunil, sir.
Yes.
Now I request Stephen Knott, sir. Sir, you can start your session and you can start your slides.
Sorry, what was that?
You can start your session, sir. You can start share screen.
Share the screen.
Yes.
This one.
Yep.
I'll need the whole screen.
Okay, no, could we minimize
Yes, sir.
that because
Okay.
Just look slideshow.
slideshow
Yes.
from the beginning. Resume slideshow.
Okay, that's fine for me. How does that for you?
Yeah, it's perfect. It's perfect for us.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, well, firstly, welcome to everybody who've taken the time to watch this presentation, and thank you to all the organisers for inviting me. It's a great achievement, and you have to be congratulated on this week's presentation. What I'd like to do for also, I'd like to thank the previous presenters this week. I found their presentation very enjoyable and very informative. It was interesting to see the different aspects given by somebody else, and you always learn something. Today, I would like to just go through 4 things. Firstly, I just want to give you an outline of my background, where I became involved in forensic odontology, and then just a summary of my casework, what I've been doing over the last in forensic odontology in the last 30 years approximately, and then how that casework has affected how I have structured the curriculum postgraduate course in forensic odontology at the University of Western Australia. And finally, I'd like to present some key ideas particularly for people who are first getting involved in forensic odontology. Hopefully it might give them a bit of a pathway to gain knowledge and then increase their interest in forensic odontology. I have been a dentist for just over 50 years, but I didn't get into forensic odontology until about 20 years after I'd graduated. So it's nothing that I started straight away. I was in private practice for many years, and then for many years I was actually doing private practice and forensic odontology. And I decided early on that if I needed some training, so I went to Melbourne and did a postgraduate course there. And then I took up a position with our health department that became available in 1992. And that was the sole forensic odontologist for the state of Western Australia. So I have a position there, which is part-time. And then in 2006, I started a course at the University of Western Australia in forensic odontology. So I have a part-time job there. Now, as was mentioned the other day, there's nobody in Australia that has a full-time 5-day-a-week job in forensic odontology. Quite a few of us have part-time jobs in forensic odontology, but we have employment with either health department or the university, or you're in private practice. So my area of I cover, I present, I undertake all the forensic odontology work is in the state of Western Australia, which you can see on the map of Australia is about a third of Australia. And in area, this is about 1 million square miles or 2.5 million square kilometres. Now, currently, Western Australia has a population of just under 2.5 million people. So as you can see, it's a big area to cover, not many people in the middle. Most of the people, as mentioned, are around the coast, and the yellow dot is Perth, where I come from. Now, one of the interesting things in Perth and in the other capital cities in Australia, that's where the forensic science laboratories are. So if there's any forensic investigation, the bodies are brought to that capital city, and in Western Australia, they would be flown in. If you can see the cursor right up the top, the red part in Western Australia, from there to Perth, that's a 2.5 to 3 hour flight. So if there's a forensic investigation, the body is flown down to Perth, the investigation is undertaken, and the body is taken back. Over the last 27 years, as far as casework, it meant I've done about 1,400, just nearly 1,500 individual cases. So that's a variety of cases, and I'll talk about those in a minute. But currently, I look after about 74 cases per year. The caseload varies, as you can imagine, but it's slowly increasing. During that now, my laboratory, Path West, does about 2,500 autopsies per year. So basically, for every 32 cases that come in for an autopsy, about one requires attendance by the forensic odontologist. Just to cover this area, in Australia, clinical forensic cases are usually not conducted by forensic odontologists. In other words, I'm talking about people who may have had some injuries that are still living, or there may have been some malpractice. So for malpractice and patient complaints, there's a special case panel for the Australian Dental Association and the National Dental Registration Board. The forensic pathologists, odontologists don't do those. And if there's been trauma, even though it might be illegal trauma, those cases are handled by dental specialists. They're not handled by the forensic odontologist. I say that because I know in a number of countries around the world, the forensic odontologist handles both, which is a big workload. But in Australia, very unusual for us to do that. So most of the people we're looking at are deceased. For me, over these roughly 30 years, the main reason I've been asked is to confirm the identification. And 23% are also for opinion. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But the opinion cases have been increasing, and ones that currently take a lot of time. Opinion requests, the 23% I mentioned before, oral trauma is just under half of those. And they are very time consuming. They could be oral trauma from in a homicide. These are requested by the forensic pathologist just to complete their report of the whole examination of the whole deceased. They're very conscious that, particularly now with a very strong litigation, the court cross-examining, that they have to account for every possible injury on the deceased. And when it comes to the mouth or the teeth, they say, right, we'll get the dentist and we do the report. May also be doing oral trauma if somebody who died in custody in a prison or some sort of government institution. The pathologist does a complete examination, and they also ask us to examine the mouth to make sure that they haven't sustained any injury. The next one that is 23% of the opinion ones is bite marks. Now, we had a very good presentation by Dr. Roger the other day on bite marks and the American scene, which was very interesting, and I congratulate him on being very forthright about that. Bite marks is something we in Australia are extremely cautious about, and I am very cautious about that. But what I'm getting now is to requests from the paediatricians. This is one of the few people that we might be dealing with the living. The paediatricians sent images to us and say, are these bite marks? They've come to realise that a number of the injuries they've been seeing over the years are not just contusion, bruising, but they are actually the result of a bite mark. I think that we can help. We can say, yes, we believe that they are. Then they want to know, is it an adult's bite or a child's bite? And maybe we can help, typically if they're very large bites, we can say they're most likely to be an adult. But then they want to say, can you tell us who did it? And then at that stage, we say, no, we're not going down that path. But I'm glad that Dr. Roger mentioned that the fact that you get colleagues also to work with you when you're doing bite marks, and I've always done that. And I think it's a very important aspect. Even to the extent of just one story of a image that was sent to me, and the paediatrician, well, the registrar paediatrician said, this is a bite mark. I had a lot of trouble trying to work out, was it a bite mark or was it not? At the same time, as I work in an office with forensic pathologists, I asked a forensic pathologist to come and have a look and see what he thought. And he had a look at it and said, that's ringworms, isn't it? So immediately the whole idea of a bite mark changed. So yes, we should always confer with colleagues. The next state of the dentition, what I mean by that is it a healthy mouth? Are there broken teeth? Are there periodontal disease? Are there abscess teeth? Because what I'm finding now is once again, the forensic pathologists are asking to have a look at the mouth. Maybe they are a bit concerned they haven't got the cause of a septicemia. They don't know where the bacteria are coming from, and they ask the dentist to have a look and see how healthy the mouth is. State of the dentition, the age assessment is not a big issue in Australia. We do get occasional cases, particularly for juveniles, but they have, over the years, have not been an area I had a lot of involvement with. And for miscellaneous cases, what I'm talking about, sometimes the police turn up with teeth and they say, can you tell us, is this a human tooth? And often they're not. They're animal teeth. Also, I've requested to look at skeletal remains of historic events, maybe a historic boat wreck on the Western Australian coastline, or some skeletal material, which is obviously by the anthropologist very old. Looking at over the years, over the condition of the deceased, what I've found is, I say 35% is recent. What I mean by recent is the deceased has passed away within the last days or weeks. And this may be from a motor vehicle crash, or where there's been a lot of disfigurement, or a homicide. So these cases, the body is still, to use the term, fresh. But in just under 50% of them, the body is decomposed. And that is one of the reasons why the police, the authorities, require additional identifiers, because visual identification is only not possible but it's not, that would be too traumatic for the family to try and identify. And those decomposed bodies can be right from very early decomposition, discoloration, right through to skeletalization. And the other figure, which is surprising also to me, is that just under 25%, 23% of all the cases I do are incineration cases. And as John Baguetta mentioned yesterday, there's a lot of work to do on incineration, retrieval of the bodies, examination, and they are very time consuming. I would have, most of these incineration cases we see in Western Australia are motor vehicle crashes, where the car has probably left the road, hit a tree, been completely wrecked, and then with the fuel around or the very dry grass, the car has caught a light. Some are in houses, but we do seem to be getting a lot of motor vehicle crashes that catch a light, and that's an area discussing with the police. We need to understand why. The state of the body, what sort of deceased are we seeing? Well, 86% of them are complete. The body hasn't been mutilated or amputated, but 14% are incomplete. So you don't get the whole skeleton. Not that we as dentists need the whole skeleton, but we do need the mandible and maxilla, and quite often the mandible could be detached. It might not be there, particularly if it's coming skeletal material. You find quite often scavenging by animals may have removed the mandible, so we get incomplete dentition. So after looking at all these deceased people over the 30 odd years, I've been able to establish the identification in 78% of the cases. In 20%, because of insufficient evidence, we can't do anything. We can't say it is the person, it's not the person, it is or it isn't, because we don't have enough information. And in 2% of the cases, I'll say there's just not quite enough to establish the identification. So it is a probable. And I'm sure a lot of people are aware of the classifications of identification. The Interpol, if you go to their website, they will find in their guidelines the classification they put on, and I use exactly the same thing. The availability of ante-mortem dental data of the cases I've done, in 80% I've been able to get dental records, and 20% I haven't. That tells the story mainly why we cannot identify people, because we don't have the ante-mortem material to compare. The question was asked, do we have a central database of records in Australia? No, we don't. In Western Australia? No, we don't. The governments have a good records. We've been working really hard with the police to try and improve our recovery of dental records, and haven't got time to explain what we've been doing, but we have improved our success rate considerably. And once that's established, then I'll be hopefully getting that information available to everybody. But odontology, dental identification is no different to DNA, no different to fingerprinting. If you haven't got something to compare it with, then you cannot identify somebody. Of that group that I said that I couldn't identify them, 82 of those cases, 82% were because we could not find the dental comparison notes, the antemortem notes. But also 11%, there's not enough post-mortem material. In other words, at the autopsy, at the examination in the mortuary, there wasn't enough of the deceased to be able to record the information. As I said, sometimes we don't get a mandible. In traffic accidents, we might only get part of the dentition. And then there is 7% of those cases, of those ones I couldn't, were because of poor dental record keeping. That unfortunately that happens. Some of our dental colleagues are not recording as well as they could. They are making mistakes in not recording, maybe putting the left on the right, losing x-rays, putting the wrong name on files. That still happens. In the dental faculty, we've been trying really hard to get the standard of the undergraduate students to improve, but it's slow. It's very slow. So, as I mentioned, the changing patterns. When I early started from 92 to 2002, one case in 29 in the mortuary would be for a dental examination. Now it's 1 in 32, not much difference. The request for identification has gone down slightly, but particularly around about 2002, that time, DNA started to become important, and it was interesting. There were even statements like, oh, we won't need dental anymore, we've got DNA, people won't have a job, you won't be required. Well, that hasn't happened. DNA is excellent. It's very good to certainly establish identification, but dental is still very much in demand. As I said, DNA have the same problem as we do. They have to have antemortem material to compare with, and that's not always available. It takes time, and it probably costs more money. And when you're talking to governments, if you can save money by getting the dentist, they like that idea. The other, as I said, opinions have increased. The request for an opinion has got more and more, and the number of incineration cases is going up. And as I said, that was from looking at all the data. That is because we're getting a lot more vehicles that have crash, take fire and destroy the remains. Will make it very difficult. The identification rate in 2002 was slightly better than what we're achieving at the moment. But I think that is because it's harder to find the antemortem material. We have a lot more people that transient coming into Australia. We don't know where they've come from, where their dentist is. We have increased our number of teeth now since, particularly after 2003, 2005, increased collecting teeth as a sample for DNA. And we don't do it routinely, but when we've been other avenues fail for the DNA scientists, they come back to teeth and say, can you get some teeth for us? And we've been very successful. I don't say myself, I supply the teeth, but the laboratory's been very successful in extracting DNA. But the big thing that's really increased with me is the writing of legal reports and court attendances. When I first started back in 92, 93, the police would say, have you established identification? And you'd say, yeah, I've got that. And they say, good, they tick the box and everybody was happy. Now, no, you have to write a report, have it signed, have a witness by the police, and it's a lot more work. But the increase in court attendance is not for identification. The reason I've ended up a lot more in court in the last 10 and 15 years is because my reports on oral trauma. In roughly 30 years, I've only had to go to court once on establishing the identification issue. I would say regarding reports and court appearances for trauma reports, I'd be looking at a couple every year. So just to review those, we've had a slightly less requirement for identification. We've increased our provision of DNA, teeth for DNA. We've certainly increased the number of cases with no antemortem material. And I think that's probably fairly common around the world. We have a slight decrease in the ability to form identification by dental means. They have some improvement in the quality of the dental records we're getting from the dentist. I think electronic recording by the dentist has helped that. And I think the dental staff, nurses and dental auxiliaries are far more efficient at using the electronic recording software programs. So hopefully that will improve in the coming years. And as I said, there's a significant increase in the request for dental opinions and comprehensive reports. And I'll talk about this later, but also this is what was outlined in the talk by Gianni Ratner on Tuesday, our responsibility to the legal justice system. So when it comes to the curriculum of the postgraduate course, for identification, they've got to understand all the techniques and both the theory of them and hands-on. I'm very positive, unless you do hands-on training, you don't really understand what you're doing and you forget what you've done. So for antemortem data require different searching techniques and recording methods. You need to look at particularly now with electronic software programs that the dentists provide. Unfortunately, all these software programs are different. Different institutions have different programs. The university has a different one to our health department, who has a different one to all the dental practices. And they also have to be able to look at different imaging techniques, particularly the ones like a CT scanner, how to scan documents, scan x-rays. That's one thing that the students need to do. With the post-mortem data, I get my students to have at least 50 to 60 hours in the mortuary, standing in the mortuary, either doing casework, depends on what dental cases are available, or they watch the forensic pathologist. I'll talk about the forensic pathologist more later, but I think that's what has not been happening in forensic odontology from what I see around the world. There's not enough liaison, not enough working in partnership with the forensic pathologist. And we need to know the reconciliation process. And as I've got written there, the needs to be at the standards of Interpol, and they have to understand the guidelines required by the Interpol. Also, the students need to understand disaster victim identification, particularly the management. Identification in a disaster is no different to doing a single case, except that you're doing 50, 100, 200 deceased. But the management is the problem, the issue. And I think Liz de Cancer on Monday described how the Indonesians have been doing it, and I think they've done exceptionally good job. They certainly have plenty of work to do in Indonesia. Unfortunately for them, they do have a lot of disasters, but they have got a very good management plan, and I thought that was well presented by Liz. As I said, new technology in Western Australia now, and this has happened in a number of mortuaries in Australia, the bodies, as soon as they are admitted, are CT scanned. So now we have to learn how to interpret the CTs. How can we utilise them in our casework? And particularly if a CT scan is used in cases like a severe incineration that John Bagetta showed us yesterday, there may be teeth in the body bag anywhere. So the CT scanner really helps. I think one of the main areas that I've learned that we have to understand what the pathologist does, and we certainly have to look at the mechanism and the pathology of trauma. And that means going and learning what the pathologist does, use their text, use their terminology, and work with the pathologist. We need to look at how bite marks occur, how teeth actually bite tissue. As was discussed by Roger the other day, we're talking about flesh, not a very good recording material, and the issues with bite marks, and there are huge issues with bite marks. We have to be aware of all the issues that have happened in the past, and not repeat those. We need to have a good look at analysing the health of the oral tissues and the dentition. The forensic pathologists, they do the complete body. And now, in my case, they're often coming to the oral cavity, soft tissue, the hard tissues, and say, well, could you please give us a report of what you see? Do you think this person had a mouth infection? We have had a couple of cases where the person's had a septicemia and died, result of cardiac problem, but the pathologist is baffled. They don't know where to find the cause of the initial infection, and on several occasions it's been abscess teeth. As I said, a management of the DVI incident, age assessment techniques. There's a lot of material being published over the last 10 years. Even though we don't do a lot of age assessment, students need to understand what can be done. And I'll put the last one in after listening to John Baguetta's talk yesterday, procedures for handling and examination of incinerator remains. I think that's something that needs to be looked at. We can certainly improve what we've been doing in Western Australia. And I thank John for his work he showed us yesterday. The curriculum needs to include how to provide a comprehensive report. I like the motto, but if it isn't documented, it was not done. We need to report all our findings and make sure we've recorded them not only accurately, but we haven't missed anything. And we've set them out so that a non-dentist person can read them and have some understanding of what's going on. Our curriculum needs to understand the role of the expert witness and what the court expects from an expert. In fact, once you're a dentist, just graduated as a dentist, you are an expert in teeth automatically because you know more about teeth than most people. But the forensic dentist not only should know all about teeth, but they also should understand what the requirements of the law are, what the court requirements are, and also in their report, express it to an extent that the courts can understand them and in a language that non-dental people can understand. And because there's so much more material coming out in research, in journals, the postgraduate students need to be able to critically look at published research and say, is this relevant? Do they think that's been adequately done? And continually build their knowledge base. As I mentioned, I put this in because I think it's 4 key areas of how people can develop their skills in forensic odontology. A lot of people ask me, oh, I need to do this course. And I say, yes, it would be good to do a course, but the courses take time and money. There are a lot of things that people can do who are interested in forensic odontology by themselves. And I broke it up into 4 sections. You have to know the identification methods, whether it's just an examination, x-rays, imaging, superimposition, taking molds, whatever. You need to look at those situations. But we know, as you can see from the figures that I've done over the last 30 years, 80% of all the work you'll be doing will be identification. We need to know the Interpol documents. Not only go to their website and read all the documents, but you need to understand why they were written and also practice them hands-on. In fact, in my career, I've always used the Interpol documents for day-to-day cases, because that means that if we have a mass disaster, I'm familiar with the forms. And if possible, participate in a DVI exercises. That may be difficult, but if you have the opportunity or institutions have the capacity, they should conduct a DVI exercise to make sure that they are familiar with the Interpol documents. Pathology. I cannot stress this enough. You need to know your forensic pathologist. You have to know who they are, introduce yourself to them, ask if you can watch what they do. And only that way that then they'll understand what we as odontologists can do. And we are a team. It was mentioned several times by presenters that we are all part of a forensic team. The forensic pathologist, odontologist, anthropologist, entomologist, biologist, but the person in charge of the case is the forensic pathologist. As I say, the forensic pathologist is the captain of the ship. And we need to know the medical terminology used by the forensic pathologist. Maybe in our dental school training, we were told different things about pathology, how to record injuries, but the medical terminology used by the forensic pathologist is the one that we use. For instance, we need to know all the terminology for decomposition. We need to know the terminology for injuries, whether it's a blunt force or a sharp force. The pathologists are very specific on what terms they use. And if you have a court case and you have the pathologist report and you have the odontologist report and they are using different words, well, that causes a lot of confusion to the justice system. Thirdly, legal aspects. We need to know the structure of your justice system. Okay, each country will have a slightly different system. A lot of our countries have come from the British system, but you need to understand how it works, how the court's structure is, how people are scrutinized in the courts. And what I would suggest is that for people to go into court proceedings and sit there and listen to hear what goes on. If our pathologists, forensic pathologists, have had to go to a court hearing, I get my students to go in and watch and just see how the courts and the court system conducts the hearing. The fourth area that people can do on their own, as I mentioned, know the role of the expert witness and what our limitations are. Because if that you have to go to court or you're writing a document, you have to know what you can and cannot include in your documents. And the last point is develop the knowledge of how to structure a report. I cannot stress that far enough. That's something that early on in my odontology career, I didn't have to do because they were quite happy to say, yes, that's him, that's what happened, tick that box. Now, no, you need to have a good report and you need to have a structured report. I'm getting better at it. I wasn't particularly good when I started, but I'm getting better. But one thing I do see from looking at a lot of dental records, how poor I think our dental profession is in writing reports. And basically, we never had any training in report writing. So I really encourage you to do that. Thank you. So if anybody wants any further information or want to contact me, feel free to contact me at either of these email contacts. What I've been trying to do is just show you what evolved over my last 30 years and what my casework has led me to structure a course around, and what I believe we as forensic odontologists should be looking at and need to have in our training. Thank you.
If any participant have any question, they can raise your hand. One second. Goria, sir.
Hello, Professor Stephen Knott. Your presentation was very good and gave the practical how it is being done in your country and in your region. I have one question and one query. So it is in India, postmortem examination is being done by forensic pathologist, and they are rarely sending requests for forensic odontologists to be involved. And even when they send, the dentists are rarely willing to participate in such exercise. How the forensic odontologists are being involved in autopsy cases in Australia, and what is the trend in your region and all over Australia, that how they get involved in autopsy cases?
Excuse me. Well, the first thing I think is you will have a lead forensic odontologist in whatever region you're in. Now, if you want to become more aware of what the forensic pathologist does, then talk to that forensic odontologist. And if you can, arrange a meeting with the forensic pathologist, the medical doctors, either through the university or through the health department who they work for. Say you would like to improve your knowledge in forensic work. And in my experience, most of the forensic pathologists will say, yes, come in and you can observe an autopsy when I'm working, and you just have to keep doing that until they know who you are. And then, as I've mentioned several times in my presentation, we have to understand more what the forensic pathologists are doing so that we can
thank you.
relate. Thank you.
Any other participant, if you have any question, you can raise your hand. Dr. Evie, please ask your question. Once I announce the name, you can unmute yourself. Dr. Evie, please ask your question.
Yes, I would like to ask about the collecting sample of the DNA for DNA from the teeth. Which kind of teeth do you need? What kind is it from the third molar or from where?
Usually we prefer to have teeth that have no restorations, no caries, In other words, a sound intact tooth. That's one of our first priorities. Usually we start from the molars, and more the single-rooted teeth is easier to extract from the deceased because you're less likely to cause fractured roots.
Yeah.
So we often use a premolar or a canine. There is some very good information regarding collection of DNA from teeth, reference from Dr. David Sweet from the Bold Clinic in Canada. From David's work, I've also written a protocol of how to select and take teeth for samples for DNA, which you're very welcome to have if you want to.
Okay, thank you.
Any other participant? The participant who are on the YouTube live, they can type your question. I'll read the question. There is one question from Hazim from the YouTube. What about the role of forensic oral pathologist?
From the forensic?
What about the role of forensic oral pathologist?
Yes, the oral pathologist I have used as a consultant with me. I've had some cases where we've had oral infections, soft tissue infections particularly, and I've had, I asked them to come with me into the mortuary, and they have a examination of the area of concern, and that is then recorded. They write a report, and that is part of the forensic pathologist report. That has also been done on several occasions, also with the maxillofacial surgeons. I've seen some fractures, and I'm a bit concerned that I'm not sure what's happened. I will ask the forensic the maxillofacial surgeons to come in with me. They'll do the examination, and their report goes with the forensic pathology report into the case file.
Dr. Satyajit Rajesh, sir, you can ask your question. Please unmute and ask the question.
Hello. Yes, Dr. Knott, thank you for a very nice presentation. I have a question to you regarding, you said that you can take help of oral pathologists and maxillofacial surgeons if you want to write reports and want to get confirm the things you think you need help in. But in our country, as far as I know, in cases of autopsy, only the opinion of government employees matters. So is that the case in Australia too? Because if it is a alive case, like you have to identify the age of a alive person, then any dentist can give the opinion about that. But if it is an autopsy case, then only and only a government employed doctor can give the opinion. So is that so in your country also?
No, but there's no private, sorry, on the deceased, yes, we can give a report by the dental specialist, whether it be oral medicine, oral pathology, or the oral surgeon, maxillofacial surgeons. They are deceased and the living are treated as equal. But what I mentioned early on is that in Australia, most forensic odontologists, we virtually all do not deal with a lot of living people, unless we're just acting as a normal dentist. But as our specialty in forensic odontology, we would leave that examination to the clinical specialists to do that. But coming back, repeating myself, yes, the other dental specialists can give reports on the deceased, any specialist.
So when you take help of such specialists, do you take report from them and attach their report to your report, or you just write in your report that opinion taken from such and such doctor?
No, I ask them to write a report on their own letterhead, that would go in conjunction with my report to the forensic pathologist.
Okay.
And I would also make sure that that consultant, that dental consultant, is also paid for what he does or she does.
Okay, so you supplement your report with the expert's report. That is
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Dr. Knott. It was nice listening to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I request Nivida to unmute and ask your question.
Thank you, sir, for your informative speech. Sir, can you tell us about the use of differences in teeth set from the different races? I mean, do you use the racial differences while criminal investigation?
Sorry, could you say that again, please?
I'm asking, do you use racial differences from different people who are from different races? So do you have any experience in that area that you can find racial differences among teeth sets?
We have in Australia particularly, we have a very multicultural society, and there are a lot of ethnic groups. As far as the dentition goes, I haven't noticed any significant difference. Everybody's dentition is examined as the individual, but I have not found any signs that could tell me what the ethnicity of that person is.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much.
Porvi Singh, you can ask your question. Porvi.
Hello.
Hi.
Thank you, sir, for this knowledgeable session. Sir, I want to ask, is there a scope for MSc forensic student who is pursuing their PhD in forensic odontology in Australia?
There are a number of institutions in Australia that run postgraduate courses. I'll start with the one that I have in University of Western Australia, which is a diploma course. There is a course in Adelaide, University of in Adelaide. They have a diploma and a master's course, and there is a course at the Monash University in Victoria, which also has a master's course. So there are 3 universities in Australia that run postgraduate forensic odontology courses.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Any other participant have any question? If not, we can proceed for the closing. Dr. Evie, you can ask your question. You can unmute yourself.
Yes. Dr. Stephen Knott, maybe I would like to adding that Nifida asking is what if you found this unidentified person is in somewhere, and could you do the differential of the rest of this person is maybe Caucasian, what we call it, Negroid or African? If you said that Australian have multiracial, of course, but can you define that this missing person is actually not maybe you can say this is the Mongoloid or Asian or something? Is it different in the dental for the identification?
In a case like that, there's that would be the case pathologist who'd be in charge of the case would call in a forensic anthropologist. Now, the forensic anthropologist would look at the whole skeleton, skeletal remains, certainly try to determine what ethnic background they came from. They'd ask the forensic odontologist to have a look at the teeth. And between the 3 of us, particularly with the anthropologist, we would try and establish what ethnic background they came from. That is not as easy as it sounds. And from the teeth, we can really not get a great deal of information about different ethnic groups. And of course, as you know, in a country like Australia, we have interrelations between Caucasian people and other groups of people. So there's a mixture of traits.
So hope
I
we
see.
can,
So it might be should be doing the comprehensive examination first, not only for the forensic odontologist can significantly to identify this is the this from this area person. So for us as a forensic pathologist, so we always do the comprehensive reporting for the identification of the missing person. Isn't it, Dr. Stephen?
Well, if you do the reporting, but you'd also be working with the anthropologist, wouldn't you?
Yeah,
Yeah.
agree.
Yes.
Thank you.
so I think we have done with all the questions, all the question asked from the YouTube and here. I'll request Professor Sunil and Professor Neeraj sir to come for the closing remark. So before that, I request Stephen Knott sir to accept our digital certificate. So, sir, kindly accept this certificate from our side. We'll send this on the email also. So, Professor Neeraj, Professor Sunil.
Yes, yes. Yeah, yeah. Neeraj, I think.
Thank you. Thank you.
Professor Sunil, you can give the closing remark.
Thank you so much, sir, Dr. Stephen Knott, and it was a very informative and very knowledgeable lecture which you have given to us. And at the end, today is the end day of the series of the second series of the series of lectures. And I thank to our chairman, our vice chairman, and our principal sir for giving us support, as well as the Professor Goria sir, the president of INPAFO, and the chairman of AFOHR, Professor Emilio, as well as National PG College, Lucknow, as well as Dr. Ranjit, who is the SIPS director, and he was CEO, who has supported us in in organizing this particular webinar, in the series of lectures, as well as part 1 and part 2. And today we come to the end of the session. And if you have any queries or anything, anyway, the emails has already been displayed. You can have send to the emails to us. And thank you. Looking forward to meet you in further series of lectures.
Certificates will be sent in another 10 to 15 days to everybody.
Yeah.
Let me congratulate the organizing team led by Dr. Sunil and with their other members, Dr. Neeraj and Dr. Ranjit Singh. They have wonderfully done all these 5 lectures, and I congratulate all of them. And I also congratulate the speakers, Stephen Knott, Lista Cancer, Jayani Viratne, Roger, and Dr. John Barketa at this time that they have spent their valuable time, and they have come to help get the aims achieved of the Indo-Pacific Academy of Forensic Odontology. Thank you to the organizers. Thank you to all the speakers once again.
I would like to thank INPEFO and AFOHR, especially SIFS and National PG College Lucknow, and moreover Tirthankar Mahavir University Moradabad to allow us to bring this program twice. And thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye. See you again.
Thank you, Stephen. Hi, Emilio, would you like to thank? Emilio, yeah, please.
Emilio, yeah, I request Emilio, sir. Yeah.
Yes, I would like to thank the organization to Dr. Sanil, was a perfect moderator. I would like also to publicly thank Dr. Ranjit, our technical experts for the Zoom. And finally, of course, I enjoyed the presentation by Stephen Knott. We always need to learn from a very experienced odontologist. That's the way to do. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you to all the speakers. Thank you to Roger. Thank you to Avi. Thank you to Dr. Lisda, all the speakers who were involved. Thank you, INPAFO, for involving AFOR. And let's continue on this in this way. Let's continue in sharing knowledge using this tool. It is very good for everyone in the world. Thank you. and have a nice
Thank you.
weekend.
Thank you,
Professor Emilio.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, all the delegates. Thank you so much.
Thank you.